Welcome to the Write, Publish, Market podcast. If you're an entrepreneur considering writing a book to serve your business, you're in the right place. Or maybe you've already decided. That's even better. I'm your host, Jodi Brandon, book publishing partner for entrepreneurs and 20-year veteran of the book publishing industry. On the Write, Publish, Market podcast, in addition to learning from me, you'll meet entrepreneurs just like you and hear about their experiences as we explore all facets of writing, publishing, and marketing a book that will help your business grow in ways you might not even have dreamed of yet. Today's guest is Chantelle Andercastle, who works with solo entrepreneurs to create their own personal business binder, an evolving reference point that leads to more aligned and deliberate decisions. Beyond Brand Voice, the first title in her Aligned Action book series, offers entrepreneurs practical strategies and insightful exercises to define, refine, and consistently communicate their brand identity in a way that aligns with their values and goals. At Clear Quartz Creative, Chantelle offers hands-on help and engaging workshops for business owners who want to be more thoughtful decision makers. So welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Jodi. I'm really happy to be here too.
I did record, everyone already heard your, professional buttoned up intro, but can you give me sort of the quick and dirty, like who you are, who you serve, what you do, like all that good stuff, like in your own words?
Of course. Well, I'm Chantelle. I own Clear Quartz Creative, where I've been working with entrepreneurs and small business owners for 7-ish years now. And I really help people to be more intentional and be more aligned when they make decisions. Everyone tells me they want to make decisive decisions, which sounds a little redundant, but I get the feeling, I understand that we want to feel like confident and not hesitant. And so that's really what I do in my business and in my books. And other than that, in my regular day-to-day life, I am a step parent to 3 teenagers. I'm a big coffee drinker. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator. If anyone listening is into human design.
Human design, yep.
I wish I knew my Enneagram because people really care about that, but I don't actually know what it is. But,
Okay.
That's the cool
funny.
stuff.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay. I'm glad you mentioned the book since that's what we're talking about today. So let's talk about how did your book come to be? Like, what's the origin story? Why a book versus something else? And then I'd love to also, as a subset of that question, since I know your book is set to be, the first in a series, let's talk about that too, if we could.
Yeah. Of course. So for years, I designed brands, I designed websites for hundreds of clients, and I lived very much online. Everything that I did was digital. And the more that I did that, the more that I had this craving for tangible, real world experiences. And I was noticing the same thing in my clients. They were in the same boat. They're spending all this time online. And although in common with me, they liked being reflective, they liked journaling, they liked reading, they liked stationery and day planners, pen and paper stuff. None of us were really making time for that anymore. And then at the same time, as we were making all of their branding and website decisions, we were really going deeper. The deeper you go, the better the surface level looks, right? So to create these beautiful brands based on something meaningful, we had to go a lot deeper. And so we were going into their mission, their vision, values, voice, client experience, their offers, their mindsets, how they operated. And so both of those things, the going deeper and also the kind of feeling over the digital world is what led me to forego the online course option of how to teach that deeper meaning stuff. And it led me to not do the group program route. And I'd followed my desire for something tangible instead. And that's how I went for the book. So that idea turned into the first book. It's going to become an entire series. And one unusual thing about my book journey is that I don't sell a digital version. I don't have a Kindle.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Interesting. Okay. Love that.
Yeah. As one person in my original focus group said, that's a bold move in 2024 to not offer an ebook.
It is, but I love it. I mean,
so the thing with my books is that they're very interactive. So as you're reading, you're meant to be writing inside. You're meant to be circling or drawing a line from here to there. It's super interactive. And that's an integral part of the learning process. It's the whole reason why you're reading the book is to write in it and to make your own mark on it. And so my thought process was, if I offer a digital version, it's just going to become another online PDF that you don't engage with. It's going to sit in your downloads folder. It's going to sit in your Kindle or whatever. And that doesn't align with what the purpose of the book is. And it doesn't align with what I know to be important about having like a successful entrepreneurship experience.
Right. I love that. I love that. And I mean, if you think about it, that makes perfect sense, right? So how many books now? I mean, I'm even thinking about doing it. I'm updating my book. Well, it was supposed to be this fall, but probably in the spring, if I'm being honest, if I'm being realistic, about adding a workbook version, because it's like the same kind of thing. Like I need it to be more interactive, but if there's no really way to do that, like in a Kindle version, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, Yeah.
I mean, we can tell ourselves that we're going to save that PDF and we're going to like use the markup feature, whatever. We're going to make it fillable. Like, but we're not.
No. Well, or we are, and it's going to sit in that like random folder in Google Drive that we all have. That's like, deal with this later, or whatever clever title you give it. That's the place where PDFs go to die, right? I mean,
100%. And so like with a real book, my thought process, so I was a teacher before. I taught elementary school and high school band mostly. And I know that like a tangible reading experience is just different. And like, hey, I read ebooks too. I read audiobooks, like absolutely valid reading, but it's a different experience.
Yes.
And there's something about remembering where it physically was on the page. Like, oh yeah, upper left corner. When you're leafing through again, you're able to see and remember things in a different way because your mind has placed the information according to that visual aesthetic layout. And so as a result, my book is very much, it's almost more like a cookbook or a coffee table book where like it's got that kind of very colorful, very visual. There's a picture there's a picture every page for sure.
Yeah.
And my hope with that is that when people go through the exercises, when they're being reflective, they're filling things out, they're going to have that sense memory of like holding the book, remembering where it is on the page. And then when they need to come back to that information to use it later to make decisions, it's going to be so much easier to like retrieve that information.
I love that. Yeah. Well, and there's something to be said too. I mean, I'm sure there's scientific research on this that I cannot pull right now, but I'm sure that it exists about like the physical act of that type of deep work. Doing it like, I hate to say for real, but like versus like online or like typing it. There's just something different about that act of like physically handwriting things. And,
well, that's why they encourage that for studying, like rewrite the information, like summarize the information, like all of that is manipulating information on paper. And it's a way that they've proven that our brains like to learn. And sometimes I think that, although, of course, I learn in online courses as well, but like when you're looking at that video, it's harder to know, okay, where do I go back? Like you see the progress bar, but it's a little different than flipping pages and seeing the progress bar of how far you've read in a book.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Okay. And so the series piece, let's talk about that a little bit. So when you set out to write the first book, did you know it was part of a series, or did you do the first book and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's more to do here?
I knew it was part of a series because I know based on my previous work with business owners that like we're all wearing many hats. And the analogy that I used right from the start was like each book is like a different one of those hats. And so the series of them together is your whole hat wardrobe, if we're going to follow that analogy as a through line. And so tangibly, like the concept for the Aligned Action series is that each title helps you set up one tab of what I call a business binder. And that business binder is both a record of your growth over time. And also it's like a manual that you have written for your business that you consult as you grow your business and as you make decisions. So this first book is about brand voice, and what you're creating is about 10 loose leaf pages, say, that go into one tab of your business binder. And that section becomes your brand voice tab. And you use that section, you refer to that as you're writing content, as you're writing your bio, as you're revamping your contact page on your website, or what have you.
I love, by the way, the business binder visual. Thanks. Like, I love alliteration, so I love that. I love the name, but I also just visually, like in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's so smart. Like, so that, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And this book, of course, has to come first because it's so foundational, right? Everything you're talking about, like, is, yeah, I mean, that's what we use to do everything in our businesses.
Well, most of what we're communicating, almost all of what we're communicating, at least online, is either through words or through visuals. And in person, like, we obviously have that body language and facial expression kind of deal. But for the most part, when our clients come to us, they're looking at like a 2D version. They're looking at pictures of you, and they're looking at your words. And so connecting through words and that having that communication part down is such a huge confidence builder, because once you know, this is what I sound like and this is how I want it to feel, and everything else becomes a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Well, very, very true. I had no idea when I first started my business, like how hard that type of work was going to be. Like when I owed like my website designer, like the copy, I was like, oh, I'm going to be able to put that together in no time. And then like, as I was trying to do it, I was like, oh, this is actually, there's a lot more to this than I really thought there was. Like, there's a lot more thinking you have to do than you really realize when you're first starting out. So
absolutely.
Good to have that tab filled out in the business binder. Okay, let's talk about like what you liked and didn't like about the writing, publishing. Because I love, this is my favorite question for this type of episode because everybody's answer is so different.
Oh,
and I love that. So what did you like? What did you absolutely not like? Tell me everything.
Of course. So my favorite part of the process is the flow state of writing and designing the layout at the same time. So I didn't work with a layout person or even a copy editor. I did all that myself. And it's interesting because it's really similar to the process I used to use when I designed websites, except I'm designing, like I'm kind of designing like a printed out website in a sense. Yeah. But I offered copy as well. I worked with professional copy, but I wouldn't work with client copy. That was the stipulation I had. So I either wrote the copy for them or I worked with another copywriter's copy that they hired out already. And I always wrote and designed at the same time. I wouldn't do it in a separate Google Doc. It would be like right in there with the visuals. And I let like the visuals inform the words inform the visuals. And so that was the part that I loved, was that I got to maintain that part of the creative process where I was working like very visually, but also through words at the same time. And then drawing on my education experience, my curriculum design experience, it was like I had this little set of rules in my head of like, okay, at least every 4 pages, they have to write or do something. And so as I was going through, it was like, okay, well, I don't want it to just be a journaling box all the time. That's really boring. And so it was like, how can I convey this information? How can I make this useful? People have said that there's information in it, but then there's these mindset counterbalances. And I'm always, as I was writing, I was always anticipating what kinds of mindset things are going to come up as they're learning this information. And then how can I give that to them next? And so those 2 pieces, like layout and writing, but also information and mindset, and that whole balance, that was really fun for me.
That is really neat. I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody who did both themselves with this kind of book. That's a lot. It's a huge undertaking.
For my process, if I were to go and sit in a Google Doc and try to type, it just nothing would come. No. It's not happening for me, it's not happening without the pretty colors in the pictures. Yeah. And I have heard from readers, it's the same thing. They're like, it's so beautiful. And like, it makes me actually want to read it. And like, I'm an avid reader. I read over 100 books a year. I don't need pictures when I'm reading like fiction or I'm reading nonfiction, but I do know that the ones with visuals are engaging in a different way. Absolutely. And for my own motivation writing these books, I'm not doing it unless I've got my new color scheme and I've got my new aesthetic planned. And every one of the books will be quite different in terms of colors and visuals. Oh, okay. Again, because I want to create that sense memory around that mood, that experience.
Okay. Think about how much time you must have saved yourself, though, by knowing that about yourself and the way you're going to work best instead of,
Yes.
following that like quote unquote traditional writing advice of sitting down with like a blank Google Doc all the time and then ending up hating the process or maybe even
Right.
never doing it. You know what I mean? That's awesome.
Right. If I tried for like 1,000 words a day or whatever,
Yeah.
that was never going to happen.
Yeah.
And I learned as I went to that the pages, like the first 2 pages any day that I would sit down, those were the hardest. And
Okay.
as I would go, like a good day would be like a 6-page day, but sometimes I could really like ride that flow and like make it a 12-page day. And it was like, oh my goodness, I just finished like a huge section of the book today. But then sometimes it would take me days to get to that point where I'm like really happy with the 2-page spread.
Yeah.
And so knowing that was important too. I wouldn't force myself to get a 2-page spread done in a day, but I would recognize when it was going well and keep going as much as possible.
Okay. And how did you recognize it? Just from like experience?
Yeah, I just noticed how my output was different. Yeah. Like how at the very beginning, like I was always really engaged in my brainstorming process. I use a big whiteboard and like the idea generating, that always went well. And then I would sit down to like make the first couple pages and nothing would happen. And I panicked.
Sure. Yeah.
Like this is a disaster. And
Yep.
And then like 3 or 4 days later, once I'd got past that kind of struggle point, and it was like, oh, well, 4 pages this morning was easy. And it was like, oh, okay, that flow isn't going to happen all the time. So in that case, when that flow is happening, if you can do 8 pages, you can probably do 12 or 16 pages today. So just like keep the coffee coming and
ride the wave. Absolutely. Ride the wave. Oh, I love that. That's in the weeds, but that's the kind of stuff we love.
Mm-hmm. Well, everyone's so different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I can totally see how some people would work well with that structured, I'm going to complete 4 pages a day until it's done. Like I know people who are like that. I just know that I am not that person.
You're not. Yeah. But I mean, and that's equally important to know though, right? Or I mean, especially in the interest of actually getting a book done and out there, because I mean, especially the people listening to this podcast want to use their book in their business in some way. So if you're not finishing it, you're not getting it out there to use in some way. So, okay. So what did you not like? What parts did you not like?
So for a lot of my process, like I'm self-published and I did like 98% of it alone. And I did have a book coach for a little while, but they had to stop for health reasons. And so like right at a crucial point where I was like getting into the like loading it into KDP and loading it into Ingram Spark and doing all that stuff, all of a sudden I was alone. And it seemed very insurmountable, like that part of it. And so there's parts of it that I really wish I'd had the budget to hire out. And that's like the copy editing, like there's just searching for typos, like getting the ISBN figured out. That took me weeks to figure out an ISBN. And I get like, you're looking at your bookshelf and you're like, every one of these books has an ISBN. This is figure outable, but how? And I didn't love that part of it. Like the metadata, the keywords, like that part really felt like drudgery to me. And I really wish I could have hired some of that out.
Yeah. That's the piece that a lot of people don't like that piece. I mean, I feel like that's one of those things where book publishing has like its own little language and its own little, whatever, and no one can figure it out. But yet obviously, like you said, it's figure outable, but it's not, I mean, like there's nothing fun about that process. Like, so I can see why you didn't like that part.
And I can see why too, like in that moment, it would have been great to have a publisher who just took care of all of those details for me. Right. Like I just knew that if I'd done the book deal route, I wouldn't be sitting here trying to figure out ISBN and like centering it on the box on the back of my page. Right. But at the same point, if I'd gone the traditional route, like there's no way a publisher would have allowed me not to have an ebook copy.
Right.
And and there's no way that they would let me choose my own pace for the subsequent books in the series. And like it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
And I knew I was making that trade-off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, exactly. I mean, that's the bottom line when you come to publishing paths, right? Like figure out there's pros and cons to every single way to get your book to market. So it's really just, what makes the most sense for you. Hey, business owner, if you've listened to this podcast for a while now, you know how important I think a writing routine is, preferably one that's in place before you begin that book writing, though it's never too late. So if you'd like some guidance in developing one, I've created the Ready, Set, Write Challenge for you to help you figure out where, when, and how you're the most productive writer. That's going to make your book writing so much more efficient. Check out jodibrandoneditorial.com/ready, set, write. Now back to the show. Okay, so now the book's out there, and are you using it as intended? Like, how are you, like, give me something, like an example of something, some way that you're using it in your business, and then how will that shift when the next book comes out, or will it just be the next one kind of adds on?
Yeah, great question. So it's working as planned in some ways and not others. I had planned to release more books right away. Okay. And so I'm thinking that the series in the end will eventually contain about, I want to say like 10 to 15 books total. They're short-ish. So they're like 92 pages, I think. It's not as overwhelming as it sounds because they're quite compact. Yeah. And I do have the next 3 titles sitting at about 90% completion. I've had my flow days where the however number of pages have happened. But I'm stuck at that point again with those other books of like, gotta get that ISBN and that typo stuff. It's like coming back to haunt me. So what's not going as planned is that I thought by now I would have 4 and not just 1. I really thought I would like put out a new one every couple months for the first bit just to get the series established. And that hasn't happened yet. But other than that, like one of the best things that's happened since the book release is I made this decision, like pretty spur of the moment decision right around the book launch of I'm going to gift a one-on-one call to anyone who writes and leaves a review on Amazon. And the one-on-one conversations that I've had with readers, those have been some of the most rewarding that I've had in my entrepreneurship journey because I love giving feedback. And so people tell me about like the discoveries they've made as they're reflecting in the book. And then I get to offer some feedback on that. Yeah. And it gives me a nice framework because like, obviously I do lots of one-on-one calls in my business, but it's nice to be able to use the book as a framework and go through and I can be like, oh no, like flip to page 31. Like, what'd you write in that box? Yeah. And let's talk about that because I think some of your answer of the question that you're posing, you probably have already worked through yourself in this box.
Yes.
So let's chat about that. And I really love answering questions that the book has surfaced for readers about their business strategy. So in that sense, like that's working really well of I get to take the self-reflections that people have made and the questions that have come up for them. And then we get to take it to that next level where we go back and forth and they have like that 2 minds on the topic thing happening. Yeah. And that was what I intended. That's what I wanted to happen. And so this first edition doesn't have the language of Business Binder in it. It needs a little tweak before that actually shows up in it. I have it as like, I call it a 1-pager in this, but really that's a little ambitious. Your brand voice isn't a bit 1 page. So it needs a slight little tweak on the digital version. But the concept of taking the reflections that you've put into the book and turning that into this sort of like packaged brand voice that you have, that aspect is working exactly as I hoped it would.
Yeah. What a great way too to continue a conversation with readers, especially people who like purchase the book from Amazon or wherever, because you don't get those people's information.
It's so weird.
It's so annoying. You're far nicer about it.
That really surprised me was like, I would see sales coming in and normally when you have a sales notification, you see the person's name and email and like,
you have all the information to keep in touch
who
with
that
them.
is. And it's so weird to get sales and not know. I have like, there's people who I don't know who have the book, but I don't know them. Like, it's so weird. Yeah.
Oh, someone brought the book from Australia. Awesome. I could be anyone, but okay, great.
And then you're just sitting there like hoping that they'll send you a DM on Instagram about it.
Yep. Exactly. Yes. That's a big frustration with Amazon that many of us share. But what a great workaround.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's been really, really good. And
Yeah.
I mean, fingers crossed that one day it gets unsustainable and I can't,
Yeah.
I'm getting so many reviews, I can't do one-on-one calls.
Right.
But for right now, while the book in the series is new, that it gives me the opportunity to do the parts that I really love. Like
Absolutely.
I really, really love the one-on-one. I never intended for the book to replace that. I wanted it to like funnel a one-on-one call into something even more productive and even more magical. I didn't want it to get rid of one-on-one calls entirely.
Right. Yeah. Love that. I love that. So what advice would you give other business owners? I'm going to assume you're going to say hire someone to do the ISBN and stuff if you can.
Well, yes, that's true. I definitely would.
I tell my like typesetter friends and colleagues all the time. I'm like, if you would just offer just that piece, like a lot of people don't need like a whole design package, right? But they just want to offload like that little bit at the end. Like, do the metadata, get my ISBN, like figure it out for me and hand me back a barcode or whatever.
Right.
Like, they could make a fortune.
Because when it comes to business owners writing books, like it's not the content of it that I'm second guessing myself on. It's not the content of that. It's not the pages inside it. It's like all the other stuff that comes with it that I don't know about.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I didn't want to touch. Right.
Absolutely.
Like, and so I didn't see the need myself for an editor, or I forget what I'm sure you know what it's called, but like the person who does the editing for like the flow of what's inside.
Developmental
like
editor. Yeah.
That's the word. Yeah. I didn't need that because that was the part I was good at. Yeah. What I needed was like just what's on the front, what's on the back, and what's on the spine.
Yeah. The book publishing pieces. Yeah. Like, I'm like, just call it like the book publishing essentials package. I even tell them what to call it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be the person who does it. But
totally.
Yeah.
So I would say that if you know that's not your strength, hire that out if you can, for sure. But I think my best advice, like at the risk of sounding repetitive, because it happens to be the through line in my business, but make decisions aligned with what matters to you, even if that makes those decisions unpopular. Like it's unpopular for me to have a print only book. It's unpopular for me to print a full color image heavy book about business than like a vastly cheaper black and white, just words on paper option. But that decision is made because it aligns with what matters to me. And that is to provide like a memorable, high impact educational experience. People tell me all the time how pretty it is. It makes them want to keep it on their coffee table. It makes them want to bring it to the dentist's office to work on it in the waiting room. Yeah. And because of that, like it gives me reassurance that I did make the right choice with that. And when you make your own perhaps unpopular decisions, when you make those in alignment with your highest intentions, that cuts down on like the decision overwhelm. It cuts down on the decision regret. And that's something that's going to make it feel just a whole lot better for you. And you want your book process to feel good.
Absolutely. Well, especially because I know lots of people who haven't done it in alignment and they end up with a product that they don't talk about, don't use in their business. So they spend all that time, all that money, all that effort, like putting together something that they're not proud of, and they don't even like ever talk about it. And that's obviously then not, same. Absolutely. And that, and then it's certainly not serving their business then. I mean, it's just, someone will be like, oh yeah, didn't you write a book? I thought I heard you like post about that one time about 4 years ago or like whatever. Yeah. So I also as beautiful, I have your book, as beautiful as it is though. It's not just beautiful. You know what? It's like the best of both worlds. It's beautiful, but it's also,
that's how I hook people.
Right. But it like, there's the information in it is fantastic. The exercises and all of that to give you like clarity and refine the way you think about things and talk about things, as because we're never done, right? Even as an established, seasoned, whatever you want to call somebody who's not new in business, we still have to revisit all of that stuff and make sure that it's still working with us, is still in alignment with our new offers, new products, blah, 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 blah.
The like dictionary word I use is like recursive. My work is recursive, and like all of our work in business is recursive, because you're constantly going back to revamp, and people think that's kind of a bad thing, but it's actually not. I personally feel, and that's where the business binder thing comes in. It's only a bad thing if you never had it like down in the first place, if you never had it clear ever, if it always remains this intangible in the clouds thing, that's why it feels bad. Because when you go back to edit it, then like you feel like you're starting from scratch every time because nothing's like pinned down. Yeah. But my goal with the books is that if you pin that down and you write that down one time, when you come back to edit it, and I plan for that, there's a page at the very end that says like, here's what to do next. Like in 3 months, come back and do this. 6 months, in a year, the edits happen more easily and like without that shame. Yeah. You know? And I want people to avoid that. I want to help people avoid that feeling of like, well, I haven't really done this. I'm like, no, you have done this work. Like somewhere in lost in some journal is this aha moment where you have figured this out. You do have the answer to this. You just don't have a convenient way to access it. Yeah. And that's why you're feeling bad about yourself. Yep. When we can avoid that. We can fix that problem. I love it. Oh, I love it. I can't wait. I can't wait for the next one too. No pressure, but people are waiting. I'm just saying. All right. This was a great conversation. I want to ask you for a reading recommendation, but before that, tell the listeners where's the best place for them to connect with you. We're going to link all of that in the show notes. We're going to put a link to the book in the show notes, but where's the best place for people to connect with you and follow you and all that good stuff? For sure. So I'm at clearquartzcreative.co. That's the website. It's theoretically up to date with everything. And on Instagram is the place where I do most of my DM conversations and connections. Okay. And that's at Clear Quartz Creative. That promo for the review is still live. So if you if you buy the book and leave a review, I would love to do a one-on-one where I can give you some feedback on that, and we can just like improve that brand voice even 10% more together. Smart. Yeah, so fun. So smart. Smart. It's just really fun. Yeah. But those are the best kinds of calls, right? It's my workaround for not knowing who people are. Yeah. Like, please do tell me who you are if you want the book. Yeah, no, it's pretty darn brilliant, I have to say. I'm not going to lie. I can't believe more people are, I'm sure more people will be doing this after listening to this episode because they're going to have the same aha moment I had. Like, oh, that's really smart. Yeah. So. Okay. And now I can't let you go without a book recommendation. So especially if you read more than 100 books a year, I'm sure you have something for us. I have several. I hope we have time for several. So absolutely. Okay. So I'm just going to go through things I'm reading right now that I'm really loving. Perfect. In my mastermind of 2 that I do with a business owner friend, we're reading The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Mm-hmm. Kind of right at the beginning of that. I know it's a popular rec. On audiobook right now, I'm listening to Freaks, Gleeks, and Dawson Creek about like how 17 TV shows shaped this defining moment in TV history. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Yeah. I heard it recommended on a couple book podcasts that I love listening to. And I watched, I feel like 3 of the 7 series. I'm listening to those chapters. Okay. It's really interesting. Okay. I just picked up a copy of In the Palaces of Memory, the thrift store the other day. That's all about the science, philosophy, and psychology of like how our brains actually make memories. Ooh. And how we store those memories. It's a little over my head, but I don't mind that. I know that on some level, it's gonna trigger some kind of like important thought at some point. Okay. I also have the physical book I'm reading that's overdue at the library right now. It's called Time Boxing by Mark Zhao Sanders. I already time box in my work and my personal life, but I'm reading through it to see if there's any helpful techniques that I'm maybe not doing yet. Okay. And then I'm an avid fiction reader as well. But right now I'm in that bad space where like all of my library holds are like, they haven't come in yet. I'm like 12th to 39th in the queue for everything. Yes. And they're all going to come in like 1 week. Of course they are. The whole shelf will have my last name at the same time. Yeah. But the most recent fiction read I loved was Margot's Got Money Troubles by Ruby Thorpe, which I think probably everyone has heard about by now. Yes. But it was really, really good. I have not read it yet, but I have it in the queue. So I liked it. I think I listened to it. Okay. So I don't know what the print experience was like. Okay. But it's as good as the podcasts say it is. Okay. All right. Yeah. Those are good recommendations. How many books are you reading at a time? Okay. Usually not this many. Okay. We're again, it's the library holds that are really throwing me. Okay. So normally normally it's normal for me to have like a mastermind book, an audio book, and a print book.
Okay.
It's not normal for me to have
not quite that many.
like
okay.
5.
Okay. I was like, wow.
I did have a goal at the beginning of this year to write a review for every book that I read. And I made it about book 70 this year of reviews on Goodreads as well. And then the habit just died.
That's a lot. I mean, like that's a lot of effort for each book. Yeah. Each book when you're doing that many.
So here was my thinking. Like once I published a book myself.
Yeah.
And I really thought about reviews.
Yeah.
It made me look at it in a different way. Right?
Absolutely.
Like,
for sure.
It gave me a new appreciation for reviews. And I like, it's a little woo or whatever, but I do really feel like putting reviews out there is the right thing to do.
I agree.
Maybe will bring reviews my way as well.
Yeah.
And also just on a personal level, like writing a review does help me think critically about a book in a way that I might not, where I might just go right on to the next one.
Yeah.
And when I reread those reviews later, like it brings me right back to the story in a way that otherwise I might not remember the characters' names.
Yeah.
But because I've like processed it in that way, I'm like I'm a learning geek. I don't know you picked up on that in this conversation, but it's a memory trigger.
Yeah. Recall.
Having written that review.
Yeah.
And just having thought about it in a different way. Because I mean, I'm reading like a new book every 3-4 days. Yeah. And so if I don't do something with that, it's just gone.
Yeah. I spent a couple years like that, just reading dozens and dozens and dozens of books, but not, like just moving right on to the next one. And then I'd go to like book club or something. I'd be like, oh, has anybody read anything? And I'd be like, oh, I did read something good. What was it? And I couldn't even remember like the name of it. And they're like, well, what's it about? And I'm like, I know. And that's so
I
just read it like 2 weeks ago. That's not, not good. But I agree with you though. Like once you are a published author, like you definitely appreciate reviews and the idea of everything about it in a new way. So
and I was keeping up a bookstagram for a while, and I had a couple conversations with authors that I really cherished, and just a couple people like reposted a review and said like things like, when you're writing the book and you hope it's going to land in a certain way, and then like you read this review that shows that it did for that one person, like that's so meaningful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Okay. Love that. Awesome. This was a great conversation. I could talk to you all day. So promise me you'll come back when you have the next book.
I can't wait.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Write, Publish, Market podcast. I know just how busy your schedule is as a business owner, so I'm grateful you've taken some time out of yours to journey into the world of book publishing with me today. If you are looking for even more book writing, marketing, and publishing information and support, check out my mentorship membership, the Author Entrepreneurs Lab, where each month we take a deep dive into one element of the book world with education, a Q&A session with me, your book publishing expert, resources, co-writing times, and so much more. You can learn more at the link in the show notes. I hope to see you inside the lab.